Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. The Frozen Encounter. In the icy wilderness of an uncharted planet, a seasoned human explorer, Captain Ethan Hayes, fights through the brutal cold to complete his mission. The planet, designated ZH-12, was known for its harsh climate and hostile terrain, making it a place few dared to venture. Ethan had been sent to gather rare minerals, essential for humanity's ever-growing needs, but his mission took an unexpected turn when he encountered something extraordinary. During a routine survey, Ethan found a peculiar glimmer amid the snowstorm. At first he thought it was a reflection of his gear, but as he drew closer the truth became horrifyingly clear. A figure, barely visible beneath the thick snow, lay unconscious in the freezing winds. It was an alien, a species unlike anything humanity had encountered before. She was beautiful beyond words, her features delicate and ethereal, with shimmering pale skin that reflected the light of the distant sun. Her long silver hair was tangled and frozen, and her limbs were stiff from the cold. The sight of her struck Ethan with an overwhelming need to help, an instinctual feeling he hadn't expected. Without hesitation, Ethan knelt beside her and checked for a pulse. There was none. The alien's life signs were faint, and her body temperature was dangerously low, possibly already past the point of no return. His mind raced, but there was no time to waste. The storm was worsening, and if he didn't act quickly, they'd both perish in the snow. With sheer determination, he pulled her into his arms, her icy body feeling unnatural against his warmth. Her eyes fluttered briefly, but she didn't regain consciousness. "Come on, stay with me," he muttered to himself as he trudged through the snow, clutching her tightly. The trek back to his transport ship was excruciating, the winds cutting through his clothing as if trying to freeze him to the core. His breath came in visible clouds, and every step felt like it took him further from survival. Yet, the alien's presence in his arms kept him going, an odd sense of responsibility urging him forward. He reached his ship, barely able to steady himself against the gusting wind, and forced the hatch open. Inside, Ethan quickly placed her on the medical bed. He initiated the ship's emergency protocols and began heating the cabin, hoping it would be enough to save her. The ship's medical AI began scanning her condition, but it couldn't provide much useful information. She wasn't from any known galaxy, and her physiology was completely foreign. His only option was to trust his training and experience as a medic. He stripped away the layers of frozen clothing, revealing more of her strange and beautiful features. Her skin was almost translucent, and her body, though slim, was undeniably powerful. Ethan had no idea what she was or why she was here, but in that moment he didn't care. She was alive, and that was all that mattered. The AI buzzed with urgency as it failed to stabilize her body temperature. Ethan had to act quickly. He rushed to the medkit and retrieved thermal blankets, carefully wrapping her in layers to prevent further frostbite. He could feel her life slipping away as he watched her, helpless, yet determined. Minutes passed, feeling like hours. Ethan continued to work, monitoring her pulse, adjusting the temperature in the cabin, trying everything he knew to keep her alive. Eventually, just as he began to lose hope, her eyes fluttered open, staring at him with a confusion that mirrored his own. She gasped for air, her voice a soft, melodic whisper, though unintelligible. "Easy, you're safe now," Ethan murmured, though he wasn't sure if she could understand him. Her gaze softened, and she reached up weakly to touch his face, as if trying to assess his identity. She struggled to speak, the words coming out as a series of clicks and melodic sounds. Ethan, although unfamiliar with her language, could sense the desperation in her voice. Her hand fell back to her side and she closed her eyes as if giving in to exhaustion. Ethan didn't know what to do next. The alien seemed to be in a state of shock, her body still not responding to the warmth of the ship. He kept monitoring her vitals, hoping she'd recover enough to communicate. The storm outside intensified, and the ship's sensors warned of a potential snowdrift blocking the entrance. Ethan couldn't risk being trapped on this planet with an alien whose physiology he didn't understand. But as he thought about leaving to make repairs, he realized that he couldn't just abandon her. The alien had no way of surviving in this hostile environment on her own, and he didn't know if she even had a way to communicate her needs. He resolved to stay by her side, keeping her warm and safe until she regained enough strength to explain what had happened to her and why she was stranded here. For now, all he could do was wait and hope that the mysterious woman in his care would survive this frozen wasteland. The awakening ***. Ethan paced nervously inside the ship, watching the alien woman's condition closely. Hours had passed since he had revived her, but she still showed little sign of recovering. The ship's AI reported that her core temperature was now stable, but her vitals remained erratic. She had yet to speak, her mind seemingly trapped in a fog, as if her body and spirit were struggling to reconnect after the trauma of the cold. The ship's cabin was quiet except for the hum of the engines and the occasional beep from the medical console. Ethan tried to occupy his mind with the mission at hand, repairing the ship's external communication system, but every time he turned his attention away, his thoughts returned to her. He had never encountered anything like her before. The alien's features were so alien, yet so hauntingly beautiful. Her silver hair shimmered even in the dim light of the cabin, and the thin, almost translucent glow of her skin was a reminder of the mystery surrounding her. Her eyes, when they opened briefly, were unlike anything he had ever seen, an otherworldly shade of violet, with flecks of silver that seemed to shift like stars in a night sky. They had locked onto his for a moment, and he had felt an inexplicable pull in his chest. A connection. It was maddening. He had rescued people before, humans, animals, even robotic life forms, but this was different. He couldn't understand why her survival meant so much to him. Maybe it was because she had been so close to death, so fragile in his arms. Or perhaps it was the sense of something bigger, something more profound, that stirred deep inside him as he gazed upon her. He was jolted from his thoughts by a soft groan. He immediately rushed to her side, pushing aside his internal turmoil to focus on the task at hand. She was moving. Her fingers twitched slightly and she let out another strained breath. "Hey," he said gently, leaning over her. "Are you awake?" Her eyelids fluttered open and her violet eyes fixed on him, this time more focused, less confused. She blinked slowly, clearly disoriented, before her gaze shifted around the room, trying to understand her surroundings. She attempted to sit up but winced as if her body protested. Ethan instinctively reached out to support her, but she flinched away, her eyes wide with sudden panic. "Whoa, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you," Ethan reassured her, keeping his hands at his sides. He didn't want to scare her any further. "You're safe." Her eyes softened slightly at the sound of his voice, though she still looked wary. She blinked again, her brows furrowing as she seemed to try to make sense of the situation. She opened her mouth and a soft, melodic sound emerged, but it was unintelligible to him. Her voice was musical, ethereal, but foreign. Ethan didn't understand, but he caught the desperation in her eyes. You're speaking," Ethan said, though he knew she couldn't understand him. "But I don't understand. I don't know your language." She responded with a few more clicks and melodic tones, though this time her eyes seemed more intense, as if trying to convey something deeper. It was clear that she was trying to communicate, but the barrier between them was still too great. Ethan's heart sank. He had no idea how to bridge that gap. The ship's AI interrupted the moment, its calm voice cutting through the silence. "Captain, I have completed a preliminary analysis of the subject's physiology. She is not human. Species designation, unknown. Her biology is vastly different from any known species in our databases. The language appears to be based on a tonal system with multiple frequencies beyond the human hearing range." Ethan took in the information but didn't let it deter him. He wasn't here to study her, he was here to help her. "What do you suggest?" he asked. "I recommend using visual communication first, as her language may rely heavily on nonverbal cues," the AI replied. Ethan nodded and then turned to face the alien. "I'll try to make it easier," he said softly, his voice reassuring. "Just follow my movements, okay?" He moved slowly, making deliberate gestures with his hands, hoping she would understand that he wasn't a threat. He pointed to himself and then to her. "Ethan," he said. "Your name?" The alien looked at him, her violet eyes narrowing slightly as if processing the question. She hesitated, then reached out with a trembling hand and placed her fingers lightly on her chest. Her lips parted but no sound came out. After a long pause she tried again, this time producing a series of clicks, a sound like wind chimes in a breeze. Ethan, recognizing the effort, smiled gently. Okay. "We'll work through this," he said, feeling a small sense of connection growing between them even without words. The woman's eyes flickered, and then, to his surprise, she gestured toward the outside of the ship. Her hand was weak but purposeful, indicating she wanted to leave. Ethan's brow furrowed in confusion. Why would she want to go outside? The planet was still a frozen wasteland, and the storm was not letting up. He shook his head. No. You need rest," he said. "It's not safe out there." But she didn't seem to care. Her body, though frail, seemed determined. She glanced back at him, the intensity in her eyes more palpable than ever. There was something in her gaze, something almost desperate. Ethan sighed and rubbed his temples. Okay, we'll figure this out. But not yet. You need to get stronger first. Her eyes softened and she nodded slightly, but there was still a quiet defiance in her. Ethan knew there was something important she wasn't saying, something urgent that called her to the outside world. But without a way to communicate, he had no way of knowing what it was. He turned back to the med console and adjusted her care regimen. For now, you rest. You're not leaving until you're better. I won't let you die out there. A fragmented past ***. The following days were a blur of routine for Ethan, but the alien's presence, though mysterious, began to settle into his life. She hadn't spoken much, still unable to communicate in a way that made sense to him. But she was recovering, slowly. Her body temperature was normal now, and the frostbite on her skin had healed. She still hadn't tried to leave the ship, though she would occasionally gesture toward the exit, her eyes filled with that same quiet urgency. Ethan hadn't figured out what it meant yet, but he could sense that something was building, something that neither of them could avoid for much longer. During their silent days together, Ethan had tried to find any possible way to communicate with her. He had scavenged the ship's database, but nothing came up about her species or any similar languages. The AI's suggestion of visual communication had been somewhat effective, but he could tell it wasn't enough. There was an ocean of meaning in her eyes, and every time their gazes met, he felt a pull, a deep connection that went beyond words, beyond the barriers of their cultures. But despite the warmth of her presence, there was an unsettling tension in the air, something that neither of them could ignore. She wasn't simply a victim of the cold, not just an unknown alien who had happened upon this planet. There was more to her. Something hidden. Ethan had learned very little about her, though he was starting to piece together small clues. Her skin wasn't like human skin, it was smooth like marble, almost luminescent. Her features were sharp, delicate, and pointed, but her movements were graceful. Her eyes, violet, shifting with the light, held a depth that unsettled him as if they were mirrors to an unfathomable world. When she moved, it was with an elegance that could only come from someone who was used to a different gravity, a different way of life. One evening, after the ship's systems had been repaired enough to maintain a stable environment, the alien sat up on the bed for the first time in days. She had taken small steps, growing stronger with every passing hour. Her movements were still hesitant, but they had a quiet purpose behind them. Ethan, as always, was near her, watching her carefully, trying to gauge how much longer he would have before she insisted on leaving. She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Ethan felt his heart race. He could almost sense that she was on the verge of something. Then, with a soft, melodic hum, she gestured to the small data terminal beside her, one of the few pieces of equipment that Ethan had not yet repaired. He cocked an eyebrow, confused by her request. "You want to access that?" he asked, though he wasn't sure she understood the words. He gestured to the terminal as if to clarify. She nodded once, an almost imperceptible movement. Ethan hesitated. The terminal had access to all the data about the planet, the mission, and his survival equipment, but not much more. The more he thought about it, the more he realized there might be something in that terminal that could give him a clue as to who, or what, she was. He walked over to it and activated the screen, hoping the machine would interpret her request. It flickered to life, and Ethan watched as the alien reached forward, placing her fingers just above the surface. A series of strange symbols appeared on the screen, and the alien's hand moved across them with a fluidity that was almost hypnotic. Ethan couldn't read a single character, but the symbols seemed to react to her touch, glowing briefly before shifting to new ones. Suddenly, a series of images flashed on the screen. Alien landscapes, ships with sleek, otherworldly designs, and cities that seemed to float in the sky. His mind raced as he took in the visuals. The alien's hand continued to move, guiding the images like a storyteller weaving a tale through gestures. At first, the images were abstract, without clear meaning. But then something more familiar emerged. A map of the galaxy appeared on the screen, with a series of glowing dots and lines connecting them. Ethan recognized the layout, at least he recognized some of the star systems. The map seemed to show a route, a trail across the stars that was unlike anything human explorers had documented. And then, as if fate had intervened, one of the dots on the map pulsed, and a symbol appeared next to it. The alien's fingers stopped moving and her gaze turned to Ethan. She looked directly into his eyes, her expression tense and filled with silent urgency. The symbol on the screen was a star, but it wasn't just any star, it was familiar. It was Earth's sun. Ethan froze. He had no idea how the alien knew about Earth, but it was clear now that she wasn't from anywhere near here. The sudden realization hit him like a ton of bricks. She wasn't just a stranded alien, she was part of something much bigger. Whatever her mission was, it had something to do with humanity. "Why Earth?" he whispered, his voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. "What do you want with Earth?" The alien didn't answer in words. Instead, she pressed her hand against the screen once more, causing the map to zoom in. The lines shifted, converging on a specific location within the solar system. Ethan's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the destination. It was a point near Earth, but not quite on it. The symbol was unmistakable. It was the location of a secret installation deep within the outer regions of the system. Her fingers danced across the screen again and more images followed. They were blurry, fleeting, but Ethan managed to catch glimpses of technology, advanced weapons, ships unlike anything humanity had ever created, and something else. Something hidden beneath the surface of a dark, barren moon. His pulse quickened. This wasn't just a rescue mission. Whatever she was trying to show him, whatever secret she was hiding, it had to do with something far more dangerous. The alien wasn't stranded by accident. She had been sent here on a mission. Suddenly, the ship shook, jolting Ethan out of his thoughts. A violent gust of wind rocked the vessel, and alarms blared from the control panel. The storm outside had worsened, the storm system now a violent cyclone that threatened to tear the ship apart. "Shit," Ethan muttered, looking around. The alien's eyes met his once more, and he saw the same determination, the same unspoken resolve. The storm within ***. The ship trembled violently, shaking as if the very planet itself was trying to tear it apart. Ethan's grip tightened on the control panel, his eyes scanning the flashing red lights and the overwhelming array of warnings. The external atmosphere was reaching critical levels, the blizzard outside intensifying into a violent cyclone. The ship's hull was designed to withstand harsh environments, but even it had limits, and this storm felt different. Something was coming. Ethan turned toward the alien, whose calm expression stood in stark contrast to the chaos unfolding around them. She had risen to her feet, her silver hair flowing like liquid light as she moved with purpose, her violet eyes focused. She seemed unaffected by the shaking of the ship, as though she had anticipated this. It sent a chill down his spine. "Something's wrong," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "This storm, it's not natural. We need to stabilize the ship before it gets worse." But the alien merely nodded and walked toward the rear of the ship, where a sealed door to the auxiliary system stood. Ethan hesitated. He didn't know what was happening yet, but he sensed that her actions were not random. She was aware of something he wasn't. That map, the symbols, the flashing warning signs, it all pointed to a deeper mystery. He had no time to question it. His mind raced, and his instincts told him that whatever was about to happen, it wasn't just a freak storm. It was part of something bigger. As he followed her, he felt a sudden shift in the air, a strange, almost oppressive pressure settling over the ship, as though the very atmosphere itself had changed. The alien's eyes were locked onto a small panel on the wall, and without hesitation, she extended a hand toward it. The lights flickered, and the door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a secondary control room. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching her as she moved with fluid grace, her gaze never leaving the panel in front of her. She began to manipulate the controls, her fingers dancing across them in a pattern that seemed instinctual. Ethan watched, realizing that whatever she was doing was something far beyond human comprehension. The controls responded to her touch, and the system began to realign itself. "How do you know how to do this?" Ethan asked, his voice tinged with awe and confusion. "You're not human. How can you understand this ship?" The alien didn't respond with words, but her eyes met his. They held something, an ancient understanding, a silent intelligence. The storm outside seemed to intensify, but her focus remained unshaken. Ethan could see the tension in her movements, the urgency in the way she manipulated the controls. It was as though the very storm was calling to her, and she was responding, like a conductor leading a symphony. Suddenly the ship jolted again, this time with a violent force that sent Ethan sprawling to the ground. The metal of the hull groaned as if it were buckling under pressure. Red lights flashed in every corner, the alarms blaring louder than before. The temperature inside the ship began to drop rapidly, and the air grew thick and cold. "Shit!" Ethan shouted, pulling himself to his feet. He rushed toward the control panel, trying to assess the situation. But before he could reach it, the alien's hand shot out, stopping him. She was staring at the viewport now, her eyes wide as she watched the cyclone form outside, its unnatural shape sending tendrils of fear through Ethan's chest. It was as though the storm itself was alive, a sentient entity. He had never seen anything like it, not even on the most hostile planets he had visited. And then, with an ear-splitting screech, something shifted in the atmosphere. A massive ship, sleek and black like a shadow against the storm, appeared in the distance, slowly emerging from the storm's eye. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. This was no ordinary spacecraft. Its design was so advanced, so far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered, that it seemed otherworldly in every sense. The alien's gaze was fixed on it, her expression unreadable. For a brief moment Ethan saw something flicker in her eyes, a flicker of recognition, of fear. But it was gone as quickly as it came. She turned back to the controls, her hands moving with renewed determination. "What is that?" Ethan demanded, his voice shaking with both awe and fear. "What's going on? Who are they?" The alien glanced at him briefly before returning her focus to the panel. She didn't answer. Her silence only deepened the mystery, leaving Ethan more desperate to understand. Suddenly the ship's internal systems blared a new warning. Unknown vessel detected. Ethan's pulse raced as the strange ship loomed closer, its presence overwhelming. His mind spun with questions but no answers came. He tried to reach for the ship's weapons console, but the alien's voice, low and urgent, stopped him before his fingers even touched the controls. "Don't," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm's deafening roar. "They will sense it." Ethan froze. Who will sense what? She turned to him then, her eyes locking with his. The weight of her gaze was like 1,000 unspoken words crashing into him all at once. There was a depth to her stare, an ancient, sorrowful wisdom that seemed to transcend everything he had ever known. In that moment he understood something fundamental. This wasn't just about survival. This wasn't just about her being lost on a strange planet. This was a warning. She was trying to protect him from something much worse than he could imagine. The ship's exterior shuddered violently again, the sensors going wild as the black vessel neared. The alien's fingers moved swiftly across the control panel, activating shields and locking down systems. But it was too late. The mysterious ship was already too close. A powerful energy blast struck the ship's hull, sending Ethan flying back into the wall. The lights flickered and the ship groaned in protest. He felt the heat of the blast even through the thick walls, and the air in the cabin thickened with tension. He pushed himself off the ground, disoriented but determined. He had to act. "Hold on," he yelled, rushing back toward the alien. "We need to." But before he could finish his sentence, the ship rocked again, this time with a force so intense that the walls buckled. Sparks flew from the control panels, and the entire cabin plunged into darkness. In the silence that followed, only the soft hum of the alien's voice reached his ears. She was speaking, more words than she had ever uttered in his presence, her tone a low, haunting melody. It was almost as though she were singing. Her eyes closed and her hands rose above her, glowing with a faint, ethereal light. She was calling upon something, summoning something from deep within the ship. Ethan didn't know what she was doing, but he knew it was their only chance. The storm outside raged, the black vessel circling like a predator in the skies. And in that moment, as the alien's voice rang through the ship, Ethan realized one terrifying truth. The storm wasn't just a storm. It was a signal. The reckoning asterisk asterisk. The air inside the ship seemed to hum with energy as the alien's chant filled the space. Ethan could feel the resonance of her voice, like a distant echo reverberating through his very bones. The temperature in the cabin shifted, becoming colder, yet somehow electrified, as if the ship's systems were being flooded with raw power. He watched helplessly, his mind racing. The alien was doing something, summoning something, but what? Whatever it was beyond anything he could comprehend. The storm outside, the unknown ship, everything felt like it was leading to a confrontation that neither of them were prepared for. Ethan moved toward the control panel, his hands still shaking from the earlier blast. The black vessel outside hovered ominously, its dark shape blocking out the stars. His mind churned with 1,000 questions, none of which had answers. Who were these people? What did they want? And most importantly, why had the alien been sent here? As if sensing his uncertainty, the alien's eyes opened again. Her violet gaze met his with an intensity that took his breath away. There was no fear in her eyes, just a calm, quiet understanding. It was as if she had been preparing for this moment her entire life. She gestured toward him, her hand hovering in the air, a silent request for him to come closer. Without thinking, Ethan stepped toward her, drawn by the gravity of her presence. She reached out and placed her hand on his chest, her touch cold but strangely comforting. For a moment time seemed to stretch. Ethan could feel something shifting inside him, a deep connection that was both foreign and familiar. It was like the ship, the storm, the alien, all of it was a part of a much larger puzzle. He was part of it too, whether he liked it or not. The alien's voice faded into a whisper, and her fingers slid off his chest, pointing toward the viewport. "Look," she said softly, though the words felt like a melodic hum in his mind rather than sound. Ethan followed her gaze, his heart pounding in his chest as he looked out the viewport. The storm outside had settled for a moment, the swirling winds calming. But the black vessel was still there, closer now, its presence undeniable. And it wasn't just the ship he saw. There were figures moving on its hull, strange beings in armored suits, their faces obscured by helmets. They were preparing for something. The alien's hand tightened around Ethan's wrist, her eyes intense with a mixture of determination and fear. He could sense that she was waiting for something, waiting for the right moment. Suddenly, the ship's systems lit up, displaying new incoming data. The black vessel was sending a signal, a command. Ethan could feel it even before the AI's voice broke the silence. "Captain, the enemy ship is transmitting a signal. The transmission is encrypted, but it is originating from their central command system. The message is clear. We are here for the one who carries the gene." Ethan froze. The words sent a jolt of ice through his veins. The one who carries the gene. What did that mean? Who were they talking about? The alien's grip on his wrist tightened. Her violet eyes locked onto his, and in that instant he understood. "It's me." He hadn't realized it before, but now everything clicked. The way she had protected him, the way the storm had reacted when she arrived, the strange power she wielded. She hadn't just been a victim. She had been searching for something. Someone, and that someone was him. The alien let go of his wrist and stepped back, her hands raised in a defensive stance. The hum of energy inside the ship was growing louder, more intense. It was almost as if the ship itself were alive, resonating with the alien's power. She turned toward the viewport once more, her expression unwavering. "Stay close," she said, her voice more forceful now, though still in that strange melodic hum. "Do not move. Do not fight. You will know when to act." Ethan nodded, his mind racing as he tried to process everything that had just been revealed. The one who carries the gene. That meant he was a target. These figures outside, these enemies, were not just here for a rescue mission. They were here for him. The ship outside shifted again, the shadows of the armored figures stretching across the hull. The black vessel seemed to pulse, its engines humming with dark energy. Ethan could feel the malevolent force radiating from it, and a cold shiver ran down his spine. Whoever they were powerful, and they were coming for him. The alien moved quickly now, her hands weaving in the air like a conductor guiding an orchestra. The energy in the room surged and the walls seemed to tremble. Ethan's heart pounded as the alien's movements became more frantic, more desperate. She was preparing for something. But what? The ship's systems flickered, the exterior hull shaking under the pressure of the incoming ship. The alien's energy was reaching its peak, and Ethan could feel the ship vibrating with an intensity that threatened to rip it apart. Then, without warning, the black vessel fired. A powerful pulse of energy slammed into the ship's hull, causing it to shudder violently. The lights flickered and dimmed as alarms screamed through the ship. Ethan stumbled, grabbing onto the wall to steady himself, but the alien was already ahead of him. Her hands were outstretched, and her body seemed to shimmer with energy as she deflected the blast. It hit an invisible barrier around her, sparking and crackling like lightning, but she held firm, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. For a moment, the chaos outside paused and Ethan's thoughts seemed to slow. He was witnessing something incredible, something he couldn't fully understand. The alien wasn't just an ally, she was a force to be reckoned with. But even she couldn't hold back the storm forever. Another blast. Stronger this time. The ship groaned under the assault, its hull weakening. Ethan could hear the creaking of metal, the groan of stressed engines. He had no time to think. There was no time to figure out who these enemies were or what they wanted. The ship was dying. But they couldn't die here. Not now. "Do it," the alien said, her voice sharp. "Activate the core." Ethan blinked, confusion spreading through him. What? What core? The alien's gaze was intense now, her eyes glowing with a fire that seemed to burn through the darkness. "The core," she repeated. "Now. You are the only one who can." Before he could respond, the black vessel fired again, this time with an energy blast so powerful that it sent the entire ship into a violent spin. Ethan fought to stay upright, his heart hammering in his chest as he realized the truth. The core wasn't just a part of the ship. The core ***. The ship's interior was now a maze of flashing red lights, screaming alarms and twisting metal. Ethan's heart was pounding as he tried to keep his balance amidst the chaos. The alien, whose control over the energy in the ship had been remarkable, was now under intense strain. Her hands trembled slightly, and her once luminous violet eyes were dimming. The blast from the enemy ship had left its mark, draining her energy, but her resolve remained unshaken. She turned toward Ethan, her gaze piercing. "Now," she ordered, her voice sharp but with a note of urgency. Ethan was too dazed by the chaos to fully understand. He had no idea what the core was or how to activate it. But one thing was clear: the alien was risking everything to protect him. To protect them. She needed him to act, and he didn't have the luxury of questioning why. Without a word, he scrambled toward the rear of the ship. The walls shook violently with each passing blast from the black vessel outside. The auxiliary control room had already been compromised, the systems sparking and flickering with every impact. He could feel the pressure building. Something was about to give. He had to move fast. "Where is it?" he muttered to himself, looking around desperately. He had only seen brief glimpses of the ship's blueprints during his mission, and now every corner of the ship felt alien. The ship's design had been beyond anything humanity had ever built, but there was one thing he was certain of: the core was the heart of this vessel, and it had to be somewhere central. He spotted a narrow passageway ahead, hidden behind a bulkhead of reinforced metal. The alien's voice echoed in his mind, her words clear. "The core." He pushed open the hatch, his legs carrying him faster now, desperation urging him forward. The walls trembled again as another blast slammed into the ship, and he stumbled, grabbing onto the doorframe to steady himself. At the far end of the passage, a large metallic door stood, slightly ajar, a faint blue glow emanating from within. Ethan could hear the hum of the energy in the air, growing louder the closer he got. The core. This had to be it. This had to be the heart of the ship's power. He stepped forward and pushed the door open. Inside, the core was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was a massive cylindrical chamber filled with swirling, radiant energy, blue and violet, a fusion of light and raw power. The core was surrounded by a network of intricate machinery, cables, and conduits that pulsed with electricity. A hum filled the air, growing louder as he stepped closer. It felt alive, as if the core itself had a heartbeat, echoing through the very structure of the ship. Ethan's mind raced. How was he supposed to activate this? He wasn't a mechanic. He wasn't an engineer. But he had no choice. The storm outside, the black vessel, everything depended on this moment. He approached the center of the room, where a small control panel lay embedded in the floor. The interface was unlike any human design he had ever seen. Strange symbols and glyphs were etched into the surface, glowing faintly as if waiting for a command. The alien's words flashed in his mind again. "You are the only one who can activate it." Ethan hesitated. How could he? A voice interrupted his thoughts. It was the alien, though it wasn't coming from the room. It was in his mind. Touch it. You must connect with it. It will respond to your presence. He reached out, his fingers trembling as they hovered above the control panel. His skin made contact with the smooth surface, and instantly, a surge of energy shot through him. His body jerked back as the power coursed through his veins, a deep, primal force that seemed to come from the very core of the universe itself. For a moment he thought he would pass out from the intensity. But something clicked. The room around him seemed to fade, and the energy of the core responded to him, the glyphs on the panel glowing brighter. He could feel the connection now, the bond between him and the ship's power source. It was like a current, a link between two disparate worlds. As the ship's systems recognized him, the hum of energy grew louder, filling the room with a low, vibrating pulse. The core was alive. And now it was responding to him. Ethan's mind exploded with images, flashes of alien landscapes, distant stars, and technologies beyond comprehension. He saw the aliens' people, an advanced race capable of controlling the very forces of nature. He saw a vast network of ships, of energy flows, and of cosmic power. And at the center of it all was the core. It was a piece of a larger puzzle, a power source unlike anything humanity could ever replicate. The alien race had mastered it, had harnessed it, but they were not alone. There were others, and they were coming. Suddenly the ship jerked again, and the world around him snapped back into focus. Ethan gasped for breath, his body tingling from the energy that still buzzed through him. The core was active now, fully powered, and its light had intensified. He could feel it resonating like a beacon calling to something far off. The alien's voice sounded again in his mind. The core is awakened. You must use it now. The enemy is not far behind asterisk. Ethan didn't need to be told twice. He gripped the control panel with both hands, focusing on the swirling energy before him. He wasn't sure how, but instinct guided him as he began to manipulate the core's energy. The symbols shifted and responded to his touch. The ship's systems hummed with life, the shields strengthening, the weapon systems activating. The core pulsed with energy, its power surging throughout the ship. Outside, the black vessel fired again, a stream of violent energy crackling through space. This time, however, Ethan was ready. He pressed a button on the control panel, activating the ship's defenses. A shield of shimmering light enveloped the ship, absorbing the blast. The impact shook the hull, but the ship held strong. Ethan's heart raced as the core's power surged through the ship's systems. He knew it wouldn't be long before the enemy ship would try again. He had to act quickly. The ship's weapon systems powered up, their energy coursing through the veins of the ship like blood through a body. He focused on the controls, pulling on every ounce of strength and willpower he had. Now, he whispered to himself, tightening his grip. It's time. With a single, decisive movement, he activated the ship's weaponry. A brilliant beam of energy shot from the front of the ship, slicing through the black vessel's shields and tearing into its hull. The enemy ship shuddered, its systems failing under the barrage. Ethan felt a surge of triumph. They were fighting back. But just as quickly as the attack had begun, the alien's voice filled his mind again, this time with urgency. Asterisk, it is not over yet. The storm is the keen asterisk. Ethan's eyes widened in realization as the alien's words sank in. The storm wasn't just a weapon, it was a part of the core's power, a natural phenomenon that had been weaponized. He had only begun to scratch the surface of what the core could do. The final confrontation asterisk. The ship was alive with power now. The core hummed beneath Ethan's feet, its energy flowing like a river through the veins of the vessel. The black ship outside, once a terrifying force of destruction, was now struggling against the full force of the human-made ship's weaponry. The shields held firm, the weapon systems firing with precision, but the alien's voice in his mind warned him, this was just the beginning. The storm was not merely a force of nature, it was an amplifier, a weapon that could shift the balance of power. Ethan felt a surge of responsibility course through him. His hands gripped the controls, his eyes locked on the viewport where the black ship loomed. It was heavily damaged but not yet defeated. The alien vessel, despite its advanced capabilities, was still a formidable threat. The storm outside was growing more intense by the second, swirling with unnatural force. It was as if the storm itself was responding to the power he was harnessing. A sudden sharp blast rocked the ship again, and Ethan staggered, nearly losing his grip on the controls. The black vessel had retaliated with a final surge of energy, but it was clear now, the enemy was desperate. They had underestimated the power of the core and now they were paying the price. However, the alien's warning echoed in his mind, it is not over yet. The storm. That was the key. Ethan's mind raced as he tried to piece together the alien's cryptic words. The storm, the core, the power they had harnessed together, it was all connected. He realized with growing clarity that the storm wasn't just an external phenomenon, it was a living force, bound to the alien's race and to the power of the core. The energy they had activated was beginning to pull the storm into focus. What the enemy didn't know was that the storm itself was a weapon of mass destruction, capable of annihilating anything in its path. He had to act quickly before the black vessel could regroup. He scanned the data flashing before him, seeking the one piece of the puzzle that would allow him to control the storm. He found it, hidden deep in the ship's systems, a series of coordinates that connected the ship's weaponry to the storm's epicenter. The black vessel had been trying to destroy them, but it had inadvertently triggered the storm's full potential. Ethan didn't hesitate. His fingers danced across the controls, inputting commands with a sense of urgency. The core pulsed in response, a deep, resonant thrum filling the room. He could feel the storm's energy aligning with the ship's weapons, creating a feedback loop of power. The black vessel fired again, but this time the ship's shields absorbed the blast effortlessly, redirecting the energy into the storm itself. He activated the targeting systems and the viewport lit up with data. The storm was no longer just a swirling mass of chaos, it was now a directed weapon, its power focused and ready to strike. The black ship was directly in its path. The alien's voice echoed in his mind once more. Asterisk, you have one chance. The storm will not hesitate asterisk. Ethan's pulse quickened. He knew what he had to do. He focused all of his will on the controls, aligning the ship's weapons with the storm. The storm's energy began to warp, the air around the ship crackling with raw power. The black vessel, despite its best efforts, was unable to escape. Its damaged shields flickered as the storm closed in on it. Ethan pressed the final button, and in that instant the ship's weapons unleashed the full fury of the storm. A beam of concentrated energy shot forward, blending with the storm's chaos, creating a singularity of destructive power. It ripped through the black vessel's shields, cutting through its armor like a hot knife through butter. The ship's hull groaned as it buckled under the pressure, and then with a deafening explosion the enemy vessel disintegrated, swallowed by the storm's fury. For a moment there was silence. Ethan's hands fell from the controls as the viewport cleared. The storm outside had calmed, its swirling mass dissipating into nothingness. The black vessel was gone, reduced to cosmic debris. The immediate threat had been eliminated. But as the ship's systems slowly returned to normal, a sense of unease settled over him. The storm was over for now, but the consequences of what had just happened were far from clear. The alien had been right. This battle was never just about the black vessel or even their own survival. The storm was a weapon of untold power, and now that it had been unleashed, its implications stretched far beyond this one conflict. He turned to the alien, who was standing near the control panel, her posture one of quiet resignation. Her eyes met his, and in that moment he realized how much more there was to her story, how much more there was to his story. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" Ethan asked, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. The alien's gaze softened, but there was no trace of joy or triumph. Only the quiet burden of knowledge. "Yes," she answered simply. "The storm was never meant to be a weapon. But it became one. We were once its guardians, but we failed to keep it contained." Ethan swallowed hard. "And the black vessel? Why were they after me?" The alien's eyes darkened. "They were searching for the key, the one who could control the storm. You have that power, Ethan. That is why they came for you. And that is why I came. I am here to ensure that power does not fall into the wrong hands." Ethan's mind reeled. A key? To what?" The alien continued, her voice low. "You are part of something much bigger than you realize. The storm is ancient, but it is also part of a greater war. A war that is coming whether we are ready or not." A chill ran down Ethan's spine. He had always believed that the universe was vast and dangerous, but he had never imagined that he would play a role in its balance. The storm, the core, the black ship, everything had led to this moment, and now, with the enemy defeated, there was only one thing left to do. "The war?" Ethan repeated. "What war?" The alien's gaze turned distant. "The war between those who seek to control the storm and those who seek to destroy it. You and I are caught in the middle, Ethan. And our survival depends on whether we can control it, or if it controls us." Ethan took a deep breath, the weight of her words settling on his shoulders. The storm may have been quelled for now, but this was only the beginning. He had no idea what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. He had crossed a threshold. The future was no longer a distant thought. It was here, right in front of him, and the storm was only the beginning of the chaos to come. And as he stood there, facing the alien and the silent hum of the ship, Ethan realized that he had become part of something far larger than himself. The fate of the universe was in his hands, and whatever came next he would have to face it head-on. Ethan stood at the control panel, his mind reeling from everything he had just learned. The alien, no, she wasn't just any alien, had told him the truth. He had become part of something far greater than himself, a part of an ancient conflict that had only just begun to unfold. The storm outside had been quelled for now, but the reality was that it had merely been the first wave of a much larger battle. The enemy might have been defeated, but their true purpose was still unclear. And Ethan had no illusions anymore. His life, his very existence, was now intricately tied to the fate of the universe. The alien stood beside him, her posture one of quiet authority, as if she were both his guide and his equal in this strange new world they found themselves in. Her eyes, still glowing faintly violet, looked out toward the distant stars, her mind clearly focused on something far beyond the present moment. Ethan could sense her conflict. She had a responsibility, a mission, but she had also placed her trust in him. And now, in this quiet aftermath, he realized he had no choice but to embrace this role he had been thrust into. "The war?" Ethan repeated, his voice thick with disbelief. "What does it mean? How am I supposed to fight a war like this?" The alien's gaze shifted to him, her eyes softening for a moment, and then she took a step forward, her tone becoming more deliberate. "It is not a war of armies or battleships, Ethan. It is a war of control, of power. The storm, the core. These are not just weapons, they are the key to something far greater. A force capable of shaping the future of all civilizations. Those who seek to control it wish to impose their rule on the entire galaxy. Those who seek to destroy it fear what its power could become. Ethan's heart raced as her words sank in. And the black ship? They wanted the power for themselves? Yes, she said softly. They are known as the Zinther. They have been searching for the storm's power for millennia. But they are not the only ones. There are others, races, factions, empires, that would do anything to harness the storm. And they will come for you, Ethan. For both of us. He nodded, absorbing her words. He didn't fully understand the scale of what she was saying, but the weight of it was undeniable. There were forces out there, beyond anything he had ever imagined, that would stop at nothing to control the storm. And he, for reasons he still didn't fully comprehend, was the key. The alien paused for a moment as if weighing her next words carefully. When she spoke again, her voice was tinged with something deeper, an emotion he hadn't quite expected. I have seen many things in my time, Ethan. Civilizations rise and fall. The storm has always been there, in the background, a silent presence. But now it is awakening. And with it, an old conflict is resurfacing. One that I cannot fight alone. Ethan swallowed hard. Her eyes locked onto his, and in that moment he understood. She had come to him, not because of his strength or his ability to wield the storm's power. She had come because she needed him. Together they were a force unlike any other, and their survival, no, the survival of everything they held dear, depended on their unity. You're not alone, he said, more to himself than to her. His voice was steady, but there was an undeniable determination in his words. I don't know what's coming. But I'll fight with you. I don't know if I can control this power, but I'll do whatever it takes. The alien nodded solemnly, and for the first time since he had met her, she smiled. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it carried the weight of gratitude and an unspoken promise. You are not alone, she repeated, her voice carrying the weight of ancient knowledge. But you will have to face trials unlike anything you have ever known. The storm is not a simple weapon, it is a force of nature. It will test you, push you to your limits. And you will have to choose, Ethan. The path you take will shape the future of everything. Before he could respond, a voice echoed in the control room, cutting through the tension. Captain, we are receiving a transmission, the ship's AI announced. It's encrypted, but the source is? The AI hesitated for a moment, and then the voice continued, its tone heavy with concern. The transmission is coming from the Zinther fleet. Ethan's stomach dropped. They're not finished, are they? The alien stepped forward, her face hardening with determination. No. They have only just begun. The holographic display in front of them flickered, and a transmission began to play, the image distorted at first but gradually becoming clearer. The figure that appeared was humanoid, tall, with dark skin that seemed to shimmer like black glass. His eyes glowed with an unnatural red light, and his voice carried an air of both authority and menace. Human, the figure's voice rasped as if the words were formed from centuries of bitterness. You have proven yourself to be a formidable adversary. But do not think for a moment that your victory here means anything. The storm will not be your weapon. You are nothing more than a pawn in a much larger game. We will find you wherever you go, and we will take the power that you now possess. Ethan clenched his fists, his anger rising at the figure's arrogance. But the alien beside him remained calm, her eyes narrowing as she regarded the Zinther leader. You will not succeed, she said, her voice steady, but filled with the same authority that had commanded Ethan's respect from the moment they had met. You underestimate the power of the storm. And you underestimate us. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The tension in the control room was palpable. Ethan could feel the weight of the threat pressing down on them. The Zinther were not simply a military force, they were a force of obsession, driven by their need for control. And now they knew Ethan was the key. They'll come, Ethan said quietly, his mind racing. They won't stop until they have it. Until they have me. The alien's expression softened, but only slightly. Yes, but we will fight. We will make sure the storm remains free. We will show them that they cannot control what they do not understand. Ethan looked out at the stars, his gaze distant. The battle for the storm was just beginning, and already the weight of it was crushing. But he wasn't alone. The alien was beside him, and together, they had just taken the first step toward a war that could reshape the future of the galaxy. I'm ready, he said, his voice firm, though a part of him still couldn't quite believe it. Let's make sure they never get what they want. The alien nodded, her gaze steely, her resolve unwavering. Then let's begin. As the ship sailed deeper into the unknown, a sense of inevitability hung in the air. The storm had chosen its champions. The war had begun. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.